Bar graphs are drawings that use bars to show data in a clear visual format. They have a title to tell what the graph is about, and what is called an X and Y axis to show the units that are used. In this example, the X-axis is the letter grade and the Y-axis is the number of students. Presenting data in bar form allows you to more quickly figure out what data means. For example, we can take a vote and mark down who likes what ice cream, but the tally marks can sometimes be difficult for someone to interpret quickly. Putting that information into a bar graph makes it clear to the viewer. Can you tell from this graph which two ice creams got equal number of votes? You will be practicing yourself on your worksheets today, so let's go through one together. First, we make sure we have our title. We do it and labeled it book reading. Then we look at the x-axis, label it names, and the y-axis, creating the number of pages. Note we always look at the increments. The increments will vary depending on how much data you have and the span of numbering or quantities. In this particular example, it is by eights. So we have 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on. It can be by ones, so it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can be by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And in our video we're going to be doing today, I believe it's in twos. So it varies. You can also switch these items so that the graph can be vertical or horizontal or up and down. Okay, so first we look at Adam. So Adam, the data was 40, and Adam read that many pages, so we're up to 40. We draw our line. Then we look at Maria, who's 24. So the number of pages goes up to 24. And then we finish out Scott, Frank, and Linda. Before we move on to our focus biome, I just want to flip over to make sure that you have a little bit more practice on bar graphs because you will be using these quite frequently. See if you can follow along and understand how the bar graph is put together.
Children from an apartment block use different modes of transport to go to school. Can you find how many children use the school bus? At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define a bar graph. Interpret the data of a bar graph represented for a real-life situation. Draw a bar graph for a situation. Now, look at these two pictographs. The two pictographs show the scoring pattern among students of a class for Term 1 and Term 2 of the academic year. Using this pictograph, can you find out the scoring pattern of the students across the two terms? We observe that finding a trend or a pattern is difficult and time-consuming with a pictograph. In such situations, there is a need for a different form of data representation. Look at the same data represented in a different format. Using this graph, can you find out the scoring pattern of the students across the two terms? Yes, from this graph, we can clearly compare the scoring pattern across the two terms. Such a graph is called a bar graph. A bar graph is a pictorial representation of numerical data where a number of rectangular bars having uniform width are used to represent the data. These bars are erected horizontally or vertically with equal line spacing between them. Oh, John is watching cricket match on the television. Sachin is batting and Muralidharan is bowling. Sachin lifted his bat to hit and it's a 6. John's friend has just walked in to watch the match. He's curious to know the number of runs that Sachin has scored in the last over. John looks at the graph displayed on the TV screen and then says Sachin has scored 10 runs in the 8th over. How did he find this? John has interpreted the data given in graph which was shown on the TV screen. How do you interpret the graph? Observe the graph and the length of each bar. Each bar represents 1 over of the match. The scale on the vertical axis gives the measure of length of each bar, which represents the number of runs scored in each over. From the graph, we can see that Sachin has scored 10 runs in the 8th over. We could find this even without listening to the cricket commentary, just by interpreting the data given in bar graph. This is called interpretation of a bar graph so as to arrive at a conclusion. Here is the table of runs scored by Sachin in the next few overs. Can you plot a bar graph with this data? Yes, the bar graph can be drawn on 2 perpendicular lines, one horizontal and one vertical. Along the horizontal line, mark the overs, and along the vertical line, mark the corresponding runs scored in each over. Choose a suitable scale along the vertical line. Here, we take 1 unit is equal to 2 runs and mark the corresponding values. In the 10th over, run scored are 4. So, draw a vertical bar at the point representing 10th over on the x-axis. The height of the bar will be till number 4 on the y-axis. Similarly, in the 11th over, 12 runs are scored. So, length of the vertical bar will be till number 12 on the y-axis. Plotting data for the rest of the overs, we get the complete bar graph. In which over did Sachin score the highest runs? Sachin scored the highest number of runs in the 13th over. The same data can be represented by interchanging the position of runs and overs. What are the advantages of a bar graph? The main advantage of the bar graph is it summarizes a large data set in a visual form. It helps to estimate key values at a glance and clarify data better than tables. What are the limitations of a bar graph? Some of the limitations of bar graph are it requires additional explanation and it can be easily manipulated to yield false impressions.
All right, moving from our bar graph lesson over into our biome focus, the grasslands. Grasslands are wide expanses of land filled with low-growing plants. The grasslands biome can be divided up into the temperate grasslands and the tropical grasslands. The temperate grasslands have seasons, including a hot summer and a cold winter. The tropical grasslands have more rainfall than the temperate and have the same type of temperature all year. Let's flip over to a video clip of one of these grasslands. And as you're listening and watching, see which one you think it is, temperate or tropical.
The American Prairie Reserve is the largest scale conservation project underway now in North America, one of the biggest in the world.
American Prairie Reserve Project is preserving one of the fastest disappearing pieces of the American West.
I think one of the things I'm most excited about is it's not too late.
When Lewis and Clark came through here a couple hundred years ago, about the time they got to the Montana border is where they saw the wildlife really begin to increase in abundance. Modern day conservation biology has said we've got to create vast reserves. We want to bring back all the wildlife in some of these areas. And that's why when we created the plans for the American Prairie Reserve, we decided to go large.
Our ultimate dream is to have 3 to 3.5 million acre fully functioning ecosystem where all the animals that were there 100 years ago, 150 years ago, have an opportunity to interact with each other again and have a major role and impact on the landscape.
We're beginning to put things back onto that landscape. And we're really excited to think about the day when it's all back in balance the way it was for thousands and thousands of years.
We have reintroduced bison and currently have about 250 bison. Clearly, we'll have the capacity to have the largest bison herd in the country.
This is about the land and the wildlife, but it's also about people. We're very interested in making this area accessible to the public.
It has a lot of potential for its scenic value, for its birding.
There is a lot of promise for local communities. There's a tourism aspect, just like you'd find in Africa, other parts of North America, South America, when you build a reserve of this scale.
If somebody had said, would you have liked to have been a founder or co-founder of Yellowstone Park, how could you not want to be on that team? It's an opportunity to be involved in creating something where you can see the tangible results of your efforts in your lifetime and have an altruistic sense of accomplishment.
The American Prairie Reserve is critical to the existence of future generations. It feeds everything that is to be human.
This is the time to seize it and secure it forever so it can be enjoyed for hundreds and hundreds of years.
So as we mentioned, there are two different types of grasslands, the temperate and the tropical. When you were watching that video, did you figure out that particular grassland was in the temperate? Because you could tell because it did have the seasons. Now, the other grassland that we're familiar with, most people are very familiar with, or something like the savanna. So it has wide open spaces just like the temperate, but it stays warm all year, so you have a lot of different variety of animals and plants. So this particular climate, you see a lot in movies and videos with the lion prides and the giraffes and the zebra herds and the hyenas. So that particular grassland you're probably pretty familiar with. It's the prairies that sometimes people forget are grasslands, that they're the same category, the temperate and tropical. Just depends on where they're at, whether they are warm all year or they have seasons. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, so we are now ready to move on to our quiz time. So make sure that when you are remembering where things are and what kind of things that you learn from this, hopefully you were able to take some notes, that our grasslands are generally located between the deserts and forests. The major temperate grasslands are located in central North America, in the United States, the Southeast and South America, in Africa, and Asia. It also is along a portion of Russia and Australia, and the two different types, temperate and tropical. So those are different things that you're going to be learning or actually being quizzed on for this particular lesson. So at this point, I want you to go back over to your agenda and click on your quiz link for the lesson, and good luck.